Good evening. If you want to open your Bibles up to 1 Kings chapter 6, we're going to be spending some time there this evening. You might think we were there not too long ago as we looked at the story that was taking place with Elisha and his servants and the Arameans that were oppressing and pressing in the land of Israel. And I mentioned during that lesson that 1 Kings 6 houses some of my favorite stories in all the Bible. And I thought I should just speak about the other story that's in this passage that I love so much. I apologize, I'm 2 Kings. I'm in the wrong book. 2 Kings chapter 6. And I thought to myself, I think I've already preached that sermon here. And I got on our website and I looked it up, and I had. It was February of 2020. And I thought, that can't be right. I wasn't preaching there in February of 2020. And then I remembered that's when the elders asked me to come down. This was one of the first lessons that I ever spoke here before I was even the minister here working with you. And I recalled on that trip that I stayed with Mickey and with Donna, and Easton got sick and he wasn't there. And I was like, he's not going to be there this Sunday. What better time to do it again? So I wanted to dig back into 2 Kings chapter 6 and look at what is just truly an awesome, awesome story that we see the power of God, we see His heart towards others, and we see the problems that we're oftentimes faced in the lives of man in this world when we consider the God of sunken axe heads. Now, I will say that this wasn't always my favorite story. There was a time in which I would get to 2 Kings 6 as I read through my Bible, and I would just kind of think, that's kind of odd, that's different, and go on, because it just really it seemed out of place in all the things that are happening in the Bible, that we have this short little story that's recorded for us. And it was because of that I thought, really, this deserves more attention. And I've found that in my life, that passages that I tend to shelve and put aside and say, well, that's just not a very important passage. I don't really understand that passage. It's not my favorite passage. That's probably the very passages that I need to be spending a little bit of time considering what they say and what they mean. Now, as we dig into this, what we'll find is that it is a story that is detailing a particular period of time in Israelite history when there's a lot of expansion taking place. There is prosperity. There's some good things that are happening when you just think of the nature of the kingdom and what's happening for them politically, what's happening for them as they bring in, and the kingdom has expanded and grown. But also during this time, you have a renewed interest in being a servant of God. And so you have these schools of prophets that are popping up here and there, and they are either connected with or surrounding around Elisha, who is this man of God that seems to be central to all of this. And during that time, what we will discover is there is a group of men that are apparently living either near or around Elisha, and they say, we need more space. There's too many people here that are wanting to come and do this. We need to grow. And Elisha's going to tell them, let's go build something. And so they go out and they set out on this building project, and in the desire for a larger facility, they come down to chop wood by the river, and as they're chopping wood, there's an accident. And coming from my background, I had, before I ever considered preaching, before I even did the work that I did before this, I thought, I'm going to be a construction worker. I'm going to open up some sort of business, and I'm going to go into building houses. I'm going to do something along those lines. I went to school for that, and I spent a lot of time in construction sites. I spent a lot of time in building, and whenever there's an accident, people like Luke back there are just like, oh, I don't even want to think about accidents on the job site, because usually it's bad. Usually somebody is really hurt. And, I think when me and my dad used to build things, when there's an accident, my dad is missing most of his ring finger because of an accident. That's what you think about, but that's not what happens here. The accident that we have here seems so minuscule. One of the guys is chopping down a tree, and he's rearing back to chop that tree down, and the axe head flies off the handle, ends up in the water, sinks to the bottom. Really doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But while that axe head is lost in the river, the man seems to be distraught, Elisha says, hey, it's okay, makes it float, go get your axe head. Everybody goes on. It's a strange story. I read that and went, that's different. Let's go on with the rest of our Bible reading. But when you really dig in and think about what's happening there, it's really quite fascinating. It's really, really special, the things that are being recorded in this passage about the nature of the God of sunken axe heads. The nature of the God who sees unnamed people. The nature of the God who steps in to indescribable problems. I know we look at this and go, that doesn't seem like a big problem. It's an indescribable problem. It's really easy to think, I would have rather God record more great miracles. But more and more I think about this in 2 Kings chapter 6, the more and more I am so very thankful that he took the time to just write down these 7 verses and record them for us. And so let's read them together. Now the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, behold, now the place before you where we are living is too limited for us. Please, let us go to the Jordan, and each of us take from there a beam, and let us make a place there for ourselves where we may live. So he said, go. Then one said, please be willing to go with your servants. And he answered, I shall go. So he went with them, and when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees, but as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water. And he cried out and said, alas, my master, for it was borrowed. Then the man of God said, where did it fall? And when he showed him the place, he cut off a stick, threw it in there, and made the iron float. And he said, take it up for yourself. So he put out his hands and took it. Now, I said the real problem in this story that we read about, we read it and we think, oh, the problem is a lost axe head. That's not the real problem. When we come to this story, the problem is we don't understand just how bad things have just gotten for this young man. If you will recall, he is going to face this lost axe head and shout something that if we were paying attention in the next couple of verses, another guy is going to shout. He's going to say, alas, my master. That's the very words that Elisha's servant says whenever he is in Dothan and he wakes up in the morning and all of the army of the Arameans has surrounded them. And he looks out and he goes, we're all about to die. There is no way we can come out of this and survive. And he shouts this same phrase, alas, my master. Gideon, in Judges chapter 6, verse 22, Gideon sees that I am speaking to an angel. I know how that ends. People wind up dying when they do that. And he says, alas, for this was an angel. Alas, I am about to die. When you read that, when you hear that in scriptures, this is like the mother of all, oh no, things have gotten really bad. And that's exactly what is happening in this problem here. He says a little bit further, it was borrowed. And so we get a little bit more of the picture. The axe head that he has just lost, it wasn't something that he owned. And it was probably so that he didn't have access to one of these, so he found someone who owned one and said, can I take that to go do this work that I have to do? But the problem now is with it being gone, what state does that put him in? It's not like in Israel there is a Lowe's or a Home Depot or even an Ace Hardware that's just down the street that I can just go procure a new one of these and bring it to him. A blacksmith has to get involved. We have to get the ore and we have to create this. This is difficult, tedious work, and it's expensive work. And just with us reading that axe head flying in the water, it seems like just something that is so minuscule, but to him in that moment, my life has forever changed. Because what I want to do with my life, what I want to do is I want to be a prophet. I want to study at the feet of prophets. I want to be around Elisha, the man of God. I want to know more about what all that is about. But what my life just turned into is probably slavery. If you look over in the book of Amos, in Amos chapter 6, you will see a little bit about the time roundabouts the time at which we're talking about. And some of the problems that are going on in Israel, I said as a nation, there's some things that are really well off, but as a spiritual people of God, things are really, really broken. So in Amos chapter 2 and verse 6, listen to what is said about Israel during this time. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel and for 4, I will not revoke its punishment, because they sell the righteous for money and the needy for a pair of sandals. You know how much your life was worth if you were poor and in need and had nothing to offer? Because you could find yourself sold just for a pair of sandals. How much more weighty the cost of an axe head. Everything that I wanted to be, all of my dreams, all of my hopes, everything that I had going for me sank to the bottom of the river with that axe head. And the only hope that I have moving forward is that the guy that I owe it to, maybe he doesn't sell me to somebody worse than him. Maybe I get to work it off with him, but I'll probably be working on this for the rest of my life. All of my dreams are gone. So now we understand maybe a little bit more when this happens, why to him, us, we read it and we go, it's not that big a deal. To him, he says, this is death. This is like dying. This is as bad as it gets. And with that, think about the response from Elisha. The response from Elisha details so much about who God is. I think there is some intrigue to the mystery of how, I shouldn't use the word mystery, the miracle of how iron is made to float in water, how the properties and the natural laws which have been created by God are in some way put on pause so that they can happen outside of their natural abilities. Supernaturally, an iron axe head is made to float in water. I think all of that is fascinating, and we like to get caught up in those great moments, and we should, because they detail so much to us about our God. But what stands out to me is that God heard, and God saw, and God cared about this guy that we don't even know his name. And to us, he is absolutely nobody. We don't see that this guy is, he was in the lineage of Jesus. He was going to bring about the Savior. That's why it's really important. No, we don't even know his name. To us, he is absolutely worthless to our life and to our understanding of the gospel. He brings no significance to that. But to God, he was important enough to step into his problem and to work to try and reverse the situation that he had been brought into. And I think what that really does is that does show us a picture of our own need to rely upon God, our own need to see the sort of character that he has, and that is most vividly pictured for us in the Gospels through Jesus. John chapter 1, it tells us that he explains him to us, that he has come and he has detailed, he has shown, he has described God through his words, through his teachings, but also through his life. And when we think about that for a minute, we think about how Jesus shows the care of God. He does show that in his teaching. And there were times, you might think of the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus would gather great crowds to himself so that he could show them just who God is and tell them about the kingdom. But like we read a couple of days ago, he also did that with just poor old Nicodemus, who believes but doesn't believe enough, who knows but just doesn't know enough, who is just outside of the kingdom and has no clue even how to get in. Jesus takes time, not just for the multitudes, he takes time for the individual. Jesus feeds. He feeds great groups of people. We'll think of the 4,000 and the 5,000 that have this miraculous, and we like to focus on that because, wow, can you imagine being the guy that's one of the disciples that's handing out bread, and it's just like every time I reach back into this plate, the loaf that I just pinched a piece off of is the same size. It just goes and goes and goes. That is fascinating to think about. But even more fascinating is the picture of of brokenhearted disciples, some of which who have denied, all of which who have abandoned Jesus. And he says, hey, let me fix you breakfast. He calls them to the edge of the sea, and he fixes a meal for them, and he feeds them. He shows us again, I'm willing to do this for great groups of people, but I'm also going to do it for the individual. I'm also going to do it for the little guy, the small and insignificant. In so many different ways, he shows us who he is. Think about Zacchaeus. You know, Zacchaeus not only is insignificant as a tax collector, as someone that everybody else would look at and go, I don't even want to, acknowledge you. I don't even want to see you. But he's also insignificant in stature. He's so small. He's the wee little man that just could not see Jesus. So he's going to try and climb the sycamore tree just so he can get a glimpse. And Jesus takes a moment to not just acknowledge him. Hey, I see you. I see you up there in the tree trying to make sure that you can see me. He goes beyond that to say, I want to be with you. I want to come to your house. I want to spend time with just you. Over and over again, Jesus is illustrating this very thing that we're seeing in 2 Kings 6, that God cares for you no matter how other people see you. No matter how important or insignificant that you are or that you think that you are, God recognizes that. You are important. And he moves to be into or near your life. And I think that's why Mark chapter 6, in my mind, resonates so well with 2 Kings 6. And that's why I asked Nathan to read that for us. Because in that moment, you have these fishermen who have pushed a boat out to sea. They know what they're doing. They've done this before, but they're straining against the wind. They're caught up in the storm. And again, what do we focus on? Jesus walked on water. Jesus calmed the storm. Prior to all that, did you notice it? Jesus wasn't with them. He's on the mountain praying, and yet it says, in Mark chapter 6, it says, seeing them, straining against the waves. Jesus, even though they're a distance from him, even though he has sent them on to do something else, even though he has other things on his mind that he wants to do in that moment, he still sees them, and he still cares enough for them to come and show himself, and then to calm the storm and to rescue them from the situation that they are in. The gospel is a picture of this statement here. Jesus sees and Jesus cares. And throughout the gospel, we get to see that over and over again. But what's Jesus doing? He's trying to show you that his Father sees and his Father cares. That he loves you, and that the problem that you have that nobody else sees, everybody else thinks is insignificant, or that you won't share with anybody else. You say, well, no one wants to be hassled by this. So people come up and they say, how are you doing today? And you give them that age-old lie that we all tell, I'm fine, and I'm not. But my problem isn't big enough to bother you. But God sees it. He's aware of it. And he's willing and ready to move in your life to show you just what he is capable of doing. And that is the God of sunken axe heads. Now, as we think about this story, again, just like with what we read in the next section about Elisha and his servant and the armies of Samaria, or of the Arameans, it intersects our life. We read this like it's ancient history. We read this like this is things that happened long ago, and they're just, those things don't happen anymore. But then we read Paul, and he says, no, those things were recorded because you need to have hope. Those things were recorded because you need to know the God who has said, I've gave my son for you. You need to know the son who was risen from the dead, who said, I am always with you. These things were written not because they're history. They were written because they are your history. They're written because they're examples of how God worked in your spiritual family's lives. A family which you have been invited in, grafted into, and a God who has not changed. And so with thinking of all of that, I want us to recognize something. While we might not think much about this young man on the edge of the river, staring into the water in disbelief, hands on his head, alas, my master, it was borrowed. I have a debt that I cannot pay. We may not think much about him, but every single one of us has been him. Every single one of us has had to wrestle with the fact that we owed something that we had no way of repaying. And for us, the only answer to that was death. Romans chapter 3, verse 23 tells us that every one of us has sinned and fallen short. Romans 6:23 says, and the wages of that, what that has earned you, is death. And I hope that we have the same response as him. Alas, my master, I don't know what's going to happen next. But if we will think about the God who has compassion, we will think about the God who has mercy, if we will think about the God who sees this young man and recognize that he sees us too, and that he is willing to move to act to rescue us from that certain death, forgiving us of that debt and welcoming us back, restoring us, I think we will see the grand picture of the gospel. In John chapter 14, verse 15, Jesus says this, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, do the things that I've commanded you to do. I wonder if we will all do that. This young man got similar instruction. See, this young man is looking into the Jordan River, and he knows at the bottom of the Jordan is an axe head that I need, and it's buried down there, and he sees the power of God work in that moment to raise it up from its watery grave. I think we can feel the connection to that pretty easily. We look at our lives, we look at our spirit and go, it is buried and stained in sin, and yet we know that the power of God has acted so that it can be risen up from a watery grave. But whenever all that happened, number one, the power wasn't in the water. The power was in the man of God working to bring God into the water. He cuts the stick, he throws it in. Similarly, Jesus, the man of God, is laid upon a cross, and it's the power of that resurrection that makes the watery baptism successful. But when that axe head is brought back up, the man of God says something. He says, take hold of it. Reach out and take it. And he takes it, and the story ends. Where's your story at today? Are you standing by the riverside going, I know that my hope is drowned in the water. My hope is down there, and there's no chance of me getting it back on my own? Or is your story that I have seen it, and I've seen the power of God to raise it, and I am thankful for that, and I am moved by that, but I have not taken hold of it yet? Or is your story that I have taken hold of that which cost me everything and earned me death? I have taken hold of that salvation that has restored me from that. If that's where your story is, wherever you are in those three ideas, wherever you are in that, what I want to ask you to do is tell me what the story is going to say next. We don't get the young man. I like to think that he popped it back on the axe handle and he went back chopping down trees, and they built a fantastic house and they lived together, learning about God for the rest of their lives, and it was wonderful. But we're not told. It's almost as if we're left to say, you need to go write the rest of the story. So what's your story going to be? I pray that it is similar to the story that the Ethiopian eunuch wrote, as he took hold of it, and he went on his way rejoicing. Well, we do likewise. We have an opportunity this evening to reflect on those things. I hope that you will do so. I hope that you will think about the God who sees and the God who cares. And if we can assist you in coming to know him better, if we can assist you in recognizing the power that he has offered to save you from your sins, then won't you please come forward and we'll talk about it together as we stand and sing.